We're coming up on the end of the year, and that means it's time to talk about my favorite games of 2024.
Top 10 of the year.
Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we're going to begin the countdown of my favorite games of 2024. We're doing a top 10. They're not necessarily games that came out in 2024, but they're games that I learned about in 2024. It's hard when we're learning a new game a week at Brains on Games to bring games back to the table. And there have been several games this year that I couldn't wait to play again, that I wanted to practice and get better and try new strategies. There are games I wanted to show off to my friends who hadn't played them when we play tested them. So there are some games this year that I've played that have just been such a great time, and these are the ones I'm going to talk about. We're counting down from 10 to 1, and today I'm going to tell you about number 10 first. We're going to go down to number 7, and then next week we'll cover the next 3.
Number 10.
Let's start with my number 10 game. So, I mean, it's number 10, but this is a game that I really enjoyed. I've learned over 50 games this year and recorded over 50 reviews. But this is a gorgeous one, a game called Sky Team that comes from Scorpion Masqué, Le Scorpion Masqué, if you want to pronounce it somewhat in French. It's a 2-player cooperative game where you're working together to land a plane. Sky Team has gorgeous components. It's got a great color scheme. It's a good looking game. There is a lot of management of dice. And like I said, it's cooperative. You've got the pilot and the co-pilot that are working together here. One of the things I've learned since I started this channel is that in cooperative games, I really like it when there's limited communication. That is a lot of fun. It makes things tense. It makes things a bit more challenging. I think the first time I saw that was in The Crew, which was a cooperative trick-taking game that I quite enjoyed with very limited communication. Similar here, you're managing these dice, but each player is rolling them behind a screen. You can't talk about the numbers. You're talking about, well, we need to lower the landing gear or slow the plane down or make sure that we don't overshoot, or we want to stall it here so that we don't crash into that plane. We need to clear. You're talking about thematically about the actions that you're taking, not about numbers on dice and doing math. Which I think made this game more thematic and tense and fun. It's great looking with a great color scheme. It is a game where there's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot of stuff here that you're trying to do. That's part of what makes the game challenging and tense and fun, but it's straightforward enough that the rules are clear. The hard part is making that plane do what you need it to do when you need it to do it. And sometimes the dice don't always cooperate and you wind up crashing the plane when you were trying really hard to land it correctly. So it is a challenging game. Now, why is this game at number 10? Because I do really like it. It's a game that I want to show my friends. I want to show this game off. Why is this game only at number 10? Well, one, it's 2-player only. I mean, that's not a knock on the game because there's lots of 2-player games that I love, but it does sort of limit things when I have a third person come over. The other is really the teammate that I primarily play with finds this one really tough. And it is difficult. It's meant to be that way. That's what makes it challenging. That's what makes it tense. If it were easy to win, if you didn't really have to do the work here and you weren't risking a loss, it wouldn't be as interesting of a game, I don't think. But it is a challenging one, and that's primarily why it made it to number 10. It's a game, like I said, I'm very excited. Hopefully you can tell I'm excited about Sky Team, and it's a game that I only learned about this year. So number 10 is Sky Team by Scorpion Masqué. That's a game that has, well, at the time that I created my notes for this episode, that's a game that had a 7.8 rating at Board Game Geek. Let's take a look at number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 is a game that's become an instant classic at our house. My younger son is a guy who loves miniatures battling games where you're taking actions by playing cards. This one definitely has that in spades, plus it's got a beautiful theme. This is a game called Senjutsu, and that's by Stone Sword Games. This one has a 7.7 rating at the time that I set up my notes. It had a 7.7 rating at Board Game Geek, and it's just a beauty, a wonderful game about dueling samurai. Now, I say dueling samurai. You can certainly play more than two players in this game. Players are choosing a character, and you get to construct a deck here around your character. You're choosing your favorite weapon, and you're adding cards to the deck. There are pre-constructed decks that you can use instead if you just want to get this game to the table and start playing. That's how we usually do it at our place, is to just leave the decks the way they are so you can pull the game out and get it to the table immediately. It's a game that's got tiny maps, which makes things super tense. It's a game with great little samurai minis that are fighting each other. And what I think is really, really clever about this game is that your card plays are simultaneous. So you reveal your actions all at the same time. So it's not a game like some of these battling games. You want to position your characters so they're out of range or they're going to be able to do something next turn. You know where the other characters are and what their options are in terms of their movement. You have some ideas about that here, but with the simultaneous actions, you could be attacking one hex on the board, but the character moves into a different hex and then you miss, your attack misses. That is, I know it's not unique to this game, but it is a mechanism that we really like when you combine it with that theme, when you combine it with the deck construction, that idea that, oh, I'm attacking this space, I think that's where they're going to be when my attack hits. And then you find out that they've blocked or they've moved or they've done something else and your attack winds up missing. Clever simultaneous combat, quite funny when you're really trying to hit that last attack to win the game and you find out that they're not where you thought they were going to be. Clever, clever, fun game. Plus, it's got that Japanese theme. Japanese history, I think, is quite fascinating to me. I like these samurai. I like the models here. The map is modular. Everything is super tight. If you're playing more than two players, it becomes a free-for-all, a crazy melee. It's just, you could play teams, I suppose, if you wanted to, but it just gets crazy. And this is a game that does have player elimination if you're playing with more than two. I mean, with two players, one player is going to win when the other one's defeated. Once you've got 3 or 4 people playing the game, there's going to be somebody waiting and watching. Now, when we played it, we found this game interesting enough every single time. By the time somebody got knocked out, everybody else was pretty close to being knocked out. The game was interesting enough that that other player wanted to stick around and keep watching. So it was still, even if you weren't directly playing, you were still involved in the game. We had one player who was looking at the cards and the weapons and kind of researching things online once he got knocked out. So that was a lot of fun too. It is, though, why is this number 9 when it's a game that I like so much? Because there is that player elimination. I think it's fun that you can play more than 2 players, but I liked it best with only 2. But also, it's a game that the combat and the rules can be a bit intimidating to the groups that I play with. Like I said, my younger son loves these kinds of games. He's familiar with them. He plays them a lot. This was fascinating to him. He doesn't know very much about this historical period, but he likes Japanese books and he's been watching anime since he was young. So it's something that was appealing to him. And he really dug this game, but it was there's a bit of a learning curve here, which is why I placed it at number 9. That rating again of Senjutsu by Stone Sword Games, it's a 7.7 on Board Game Geek. That's a good game.
Number 8.
The number 8 game on my list is probably the one I've played the most out of any game really in 2024. It's an older game, but new expansions are coming out constantly for this one. It's a gorgeous game by Plaid Hat Games called Summoner Wars. Now, Summoner Wars is a 2-player game. At the time of this recording, it had an 8.0 rating at Board Game Geek. And what a brilliant game this thing is. I just can't understand how the designers figured this thing out. What I mean by how did they figure it out is that this is a game where there's so many different factions, but they all seem to be pretty well balanced. They keep coming out with these new cards with new actions and new powers and new combos, and yet everything works together, and it always, in our playthroughs, it's always been seamless. It's a brilliant game. It's got a pretty big table presence. One of the reasons why I think I've played Summoner Wars more than any other game in my collection this year is that they have a great digital implementation. And so I didn't have to wait till game night when somebody came over to play this one. I had a few games going with people from, well, all over creation because it could be played long distance and you just take a turn and you wait for your opponent to take their turn. So the digital implementation on this one is great, even though I prefer to play physical board games with people who are physically present. Um, it certainly did make it easier to get this one to the table. I am a gamer who likes dice pools, and this one has great dice with swords and bows and little wildcard symbols on them, and they have a different impact depending on what card you're talking about. It's a game where rather than miniatures or other kind of pieces, you've got a deck of cards, and you're playing cards from your deck to the table. And there's a summoner. Each deck has a summoner, a main hero or villain maybe. That's how you're trying to win this game is by defeating the enemy summoner. So these cards can move across the board. They're attacking each other along the way, and you're trying to get that enemy summoner down to 0 health. What a fun game. And there's so much replayability because there are so many combinations. There are pre-made decks, but it's another game where you can construct a deck if you want to. And again, it's another game where I kept the pre-made decks because I just like to play it that way. Let's get it to the table. They even the pre-made decks had exciting combos and fun combos that you could play once you got various units to the table. Um, what a great time! And there's so many factions. There was one that just came out in November, so they just keep or two that came out. I think they usually put out two at a time. It seems to be a game where you're not nerfing one faction when the new ones come out. So all of the original factions from the first box can still be played, and some of those factions I really like. So I'm glad that they're still useful and they still fit with the newer factions in the game. Why does a game like Summoner Wars that I've played maybe 100 times this year. Why does it only make it to number 8 on the list? Well, it is two-player only, and it is a game where if you are playing with the physical decks, with the physical cards, which like I said, that's how I prefer to do it, there can be a lot to keep track of in terms of the combos and and how each action plays out and what its effects are going to be. If you've got potions on the side with counters on them, anyway, there's lots of different things that can be happening on the board in this game. The digital app keeps track of all of that for you, but if you're playing the physical copy, you're going to be keeping track of a lot of that information. So that puts Summoner Wars at number 8, but it is a game with an 8.0 rating at Board Game Geek. So what a good option.
Number 7.
Number 7 of my favorite games of the year is another older one. We're talking about games that came out pre-2024, but I've only just learned about them or only just managed to play them recently. This is another two-player card-based battling game, but with a much smaller footprint than Summoner Wars, a game from Grimoire Games called, appropriately enough, Wizards of the Grimoire. This is a two-player battling card game, but it's more of an engine builder. You're not worried about positioning your cards in space or moving them across a board. You're battling wizards and you're trying to build an engine of spells. Great looking artwork here in Wizards of the Grimoire. Each card is interesting to look at. The artwork is great, and you're creating some awesome combos of cards in this game. You can only have 6 spells in front of you, and then you have to start replacing things. But boy, they interact together in so many fun ways. It's a game where you've just got 2 decks of cards. One is your mana that's going to power your spells. You need to make sure you have enough of that in your hand. Sometimes part of your engine is mana generation. The mana represents the cooldown on the more powerful spells. So very clever the way, this is a super tightly designed game. I find it fascinating. It's a game that has a 7.6 rating on Board Game Geek. So not quite as highly rated, even though I've rated it higher maybe than Summoner Wars. It's not quite as highly rated on Board Game Geek. But the reason why I like it is this. It's another two-player card battling game. I like the engine building part of this one. With Summoner Wars, you're putting cards on the table together, but it's not, I guess there are some maybe factions that have a bit more engine building feel to them. But this is very clearly an engine builder with the addition of that of the wizard's combat that you're doing. It's so simple and straightforward to figure out too. You can literally explain the rules in 5 minutes on this one. And so you've got a great looking game that's easy to teach and easy to learn. It's super fun, and it's got the engine building mechanism that I really like. Now it's an older game, like I said, but there's an expansion coming, Shifting Sands, which I pre-ordered already, but I haven't had a chance to try that one yet. It's going to have temporary spells that you can put in your engine. So there's some interesting wrinkles that are coming up for Wizards of the Grimoire. Another thing that just edged it for me up a little bit higher than Summoner Wars is just that it's so portable. I mean, super easy to put a little box like this into a backpack or something, or you can toss it in the trunk of your car and carry it around with you. You don't need a giant table to play this one. You need to have a couple of spaces, a couple of room enough for a couple of rows of spells, room enough for a row of spells in front of you, and then just a couple stacks of cards. So this one's easy, I think, to bring with you anywhere you go, and it's a two-player game. Um, Again, it is two players only. The cards are sturdy. I don't know what they're made of. I don't think it's cardboard. There's something different about the way these cards are made. The only knock I have on this one is that they do tend to stick together. It's a bit hard to shuffle the cards. Even as I'm picking these up, they're kind of like it would be tough to shuffle this deck because the cards want to kind of stick. You almost have to make sure that you're not drawing two instead of one. So that rounds out the bottom of the top 10. We've got dueling miniatures with cards. We've got two dueling card games. We've got a cooperative plane piloting game. Super excited to talk about the upper part of the top 10. My number one game is one that is in my head. I think it's wormed its way into my soul. I can't stop thinking about it. I want to show it to everyone and play it again and again. I haven't mastered that one yet. Well, like many of these games, I haven't mastered them yet. I certainly don't win all the time. I'm more often a loser than a winner, but do I ever love explaining and talking about and playing these kinds of games? So very excited to get to the next video. Next week, I'll be talking about number 6 to number 4, and then just before Christmas, we'll be doing the top 3 games of the year. And like I said, I'm very, very excited about that. If you have any questions or comments, if you want to let me know about your favorite games of the year, even if they're older, the favorite games you played this year, you can leave them in the comment section below. You can, of course, email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Blue Sky feed and the Facebook feed and the Instagram page. So we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video, you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click the subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.